So anybody ever jack up a house? I'm a contractor and I do a lot of work. But anymore, when people call me and say I have a problem, my floors are falling in and they're sagging, I say, probably should call somebody else. Because I'm not built for crawling underneath the house doing this type of work. Today I was up on a garage setting trusses, putting decking on, and that wasn't a problem. But crawling underneath a house can be a lot of work. So here's what happens. You crawl underneath and you have to put a crib. This is called a crib. The kids in the children's class would say that this is their blocks that they play with, but I've commandeered that and I'm going to use it here in the Lord's house and I'm going to use it as an example. But this is a crib you build up underneath the beam and then you put a jack on it. Get you a solid foundation and you put a bar in here and you start turning this jack. And as you turn that jack up, the weight of the house is on there. And as you raise the house a little bit, you put more blocks on top. Everybody understand that? Okay. That was a lot. Golly. I go through a lot just so you see something. Okay. I am probably, in my mind, I am the most blessed man in the country. I have a great church. I have a fantastic wife. I have a life that I am so happy with. I can go outside and I can have a flat tire and I have the stuff to fix it. I don't focus on the flat. I focus on the ability to fix it. I was taught at an early age that I could do anything. Anything. If you just act like you know what you're doing. Shelley and I commandeered the governor of Illinois' helicopter one day. This is a true story. We go to a place. I was a deputy sheriff at the time. This is not in my notes. I told you I didn't know where I was going to start in these notes, and here I am off someplace else. But anyway, we go to this place, and some of my buddies were doing security at this VIP. All the elected officials from the state come down. It was up at Wren Lake, and they had this big thing going on. And so whenever we pull up there, we're going to try to slip in and pretend we're somebody. And we slip in there, and one of my buddies, "Hey, Mr. Wilburn, come on over." And they put me in the VIP area with all these officials from the state of Illinois, and I didn't know any of them. They didn't know I wasn't somebody. And so anyway, after a few minutes, I looked at her and I started grinning, and I said, "Come on." And she's squeezing my hand. We're cutting all the blood off. And I said, "Just act like you know what you're doing." And I walk over and I walk up to the pilot sitting there. And I said, "Excuse me, my wife would like to see Wren Lake from the air." Now I'm in the area that's roped off with all of the who's who, And he said, "We can make that happen, sir. If you'll meet me around by the aircraft, about 5 minutes, I'll take you." And so next thing you know, we're up flying in the governor's helicopter that he flew down, the state helicopter. My point is, even if you don't know what you're doing, sometimes you need to act like you know what you're doing. And you need to go forward, okay? Act like you know what you're doing. And the way I learned this was I was raised, I had 3 men in my life, well, more than that, but I had 3 that I could count on that were a huge, huge influence in my life. A huge influence. My grandpa was born in 1904. I was born in 1964. And so the other day I was thinking about all the stuff that my grandpa taught me and all of the stuff that we used to do, all of the stories of us hauling hay together, and all the stories of us working, and me driving the tractor, and him riding on a load of hay, and me popping the clutch, and him falling off, and the whole load of hay turning over. I was 12 years old. It occurred to me the other day, if I was born in 64 and he was born in 04, he was 60 years old the day I was born. So every story I have about my grandpa that I was involved in, he was 72, 73, 75, 77, and was still going, was still working, was still serving. And you know what he did every night before he went to bed? He walked over and he grabbed his Bible and he opened it up and he stood there. He got his specs out, he called them, put his specs on, and he read from the Bible. And me as a kid, I saw that. And I remember some of the stories about some of the things that he did and some of the work that he did. And I was influenced by my uncle. My uncle, Uncle Paul, lived till just 3 weeks ago, I think, 4 weeks ago. And I lost him. I lost my dad 7 years ago. I lost my grandpa 31 years ago. But the things that they did, the foundation that they laid, the way they taught my mind was amazing. The way they taught me and things that they helped me to understand. Helped me to understand things that, I don't know, maybe sometimes you think a 10 or 11-year-old kid, 12-year-old, maybe he shouldn't know where babies come from, you know. But I remember the night my grandpa takes me down to his barn, and we'd had 8 young yearling heifers. They were small, and the bull had got in with them several months ago. And now these cows are here, and they're too little, but they're trying to have babies. And so he calls the vet, and the vet comes out. And here we are. I was probably, I'm going to say probably 11. And it's in the wintertime. And the vet goes over and he's getting in there and he's trying to help this cow have this calf. And he looked at my grandpa and he said, "Odd, my hands are too big." He said, get that boy over here." And so at 11 years old, I learned how to pull calves. And the vet says, "Son, get over here. Take your coat off." Take my coat off. And they put this jelly stuff all over my hand. And I put my hand where the calf was. And all the way up to my shoulder was up to here, and I was reaching around, feeling, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing, Grandpa." And he said, "You just do it. You'll figure it out." He said, "Look at me." And I look, I'm laying down here behind this cow, and I look up at him, and he says, "They come out like this, a front foot, and then their head. And that's the it's the best way for them to be born." And so I reach in and I find a front foot, and I reach in and I find another front foot, and I pull that out, and I reach in and I said, "I found the head." And he said, "Well, turn it around." I turn around and I said, "It's sucking my fingers." I'm learning about life at 11 years old. So that night we go home and my mom is there and she said, "What have you guys been doing?" I didn't say anything. And I guess my grandpa taught me that it's at that point that it's all right sometimes maybe to not tell everything you know. And he looked at my mom and he said, we had to pull some calves. And she said, "I don't want Don Nathan to see that. I don't want him to see that kind of stuff." And he said, "Calm down. I won't show him anything that he doesn't need to see." So over the next 2 weeks, I did that 7 more times. He taught me so much. My dad taught me so much. And my dad had a joke he used to tell. I was going to start with this joke, so maybe I'm back up to here. And Pastor Jason a while ago, Corley, come up to me and he said, do you know when you're going to end this? Do you have an idea? And I said, I got 4 pages of notes here and I don't even know where I'm starting at. And he said, can you give me a cue of what it's going to be like toward the end? And I said, I don't have a clue. He said, typical Sunday around here. But I wanted to start with a joke. My dad's favorite joke. He said a little boy was sitting in church one day, right down front, and the pastor got up and he said, how many people want to go to heaven? Who wants to go to heaven? And said, everybody in the house raised their hand except that one little boy. And the pastor looked at that little boy and said, son, don't you want to go to heaven? And he said, well, yeah, I want to go to heaven. He said, but you didn't raise your hand. Why didn't you raise your hand? He said, I thought you was getting the load to go right now. You know, my dad would tell that over and over and over. And then he got to where if he'd be feeling bad, I'd say, Dad, you feeling okay? He'd say, yeah, I'm not ready to go this load yet. You understand that? I'm not ready to go this load. But 7 years ago, my dad had dementia, and he got really confused at the end. And like I said, I'm a contractor, and I'm pretty simple in my thoughts. And I think I get that from them. I do think I get it from my grandpa and my dad and my uncle. And trust me when I say I believe they were the smartest guys as far as general life, as far as getting things done. They were problem solvers. They could fix anything. They could do anything, and they could work, and they could serve. And I really would be surprised if they had 12 years of schooling between all 3 of them. I would. They were street smart. They learned, and they worked, and they knew what to do. And my dad was very smart and very good at doing things. But toward the end, this dementia was really getting to him. And the nurse told me, or the doctor told me one day, said, what's happening is his brain is calcifying. And she said, you'll understand this. She said, it's like if there's a wire runs from your toe up here to your brain, and if you stub your toe, it tells your brain, hey, your toe hurts. And said he'll be walking through the house and he will stub his toe and it will short circuit. And he'll say, oh, my rib's hurting. My rib's hurting. And so things got confusing to him in the end. And so that he was confused about some things. He would call people by the wrong name and he would get confused about that. But he was never confused about where he was going. He was never confused about what was going to happen in the end. He was never confused about heaven and about God. And he trusted him 100%. And I remember I would go up and I would talk to him and I would say, Dad, you doing okay? And he'd say, well, I'm not ready to go this load. And he would say that, and hadn't told me that joke in 5 years, but he would say that. And I remember one Sunday evening, I walked up there, and we lived very close, and I walked up there, and I said, Dad, how you doing? And he said, it's just about time. And I said, time for what? And he said, I'm thinking I'm going to go the next load. And I sat there, and I reflect now about how calm it was, about the peace that he had. And that peace was because he knew the Lord. He knew what he had done for him. He knew that he had trusted him his whole life, and he knew that during his life that God had delivered him from so many things, had helped him in so many things. I remember one time we were talking about tithing, and he said, you've got to tithe. And I said, what if you can't afford to tithe? I wasn't very old. I said, what if you can't afford to tithe? And I remember us talking about this, and he said, let me tell you what happened to me and your mom. To me and your mom, when we first got married, he said, I didn't think I could afford to tithe. And he said, I was farming for this guy, and he said, I managed to save up enough money. I bought me a couple of pigs, and I raised them up, and they had babies. And he said, I was trying to raise this up, and he said, I was so proud. And I had 30 feeder pigs, 30 of them. And he said, we had been talking about tithing, and I said, I can't afford to tithe. And he said, we went off to town one day, and we come home, and the pigs were rooting around an old well, and some of them fell off in the well and drowned. You want to guess how many? 30? There was 3. 3 of them fell off in the well and drowned, which would be the Lord's 10%, right? He said, you can't afford not to tithe. And so he would teach me things like that. Every morning when he would get up, he would look at this book called Open Windows. Some of you probably, I could imagine John Thomas reading a book like this every morning. I don't know if he does or not, but I could imagine some of you reading. It's a little devotion book, and he got this thing for years. And so he would study that, and he would read, and he would read the Bible, and he would study, and he would pray. And so that one Sunday night, I went up to his house, and he said, I think I'm going to go next load. But remember, he was very calm. And I went home. And the next morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, his wife called me, and she was in a panic. And what had happened was he always got up early. He got up at 3 o'clock. And he was pretty sick, and he told her, he said, I think I want to have a cup of coffee. And so she fixed him some coffee at 3 a.m. There they sat in the kitchen. And she looked at him, and she said, you want to do the devotion? And got this book out, and they did this devotion together. And whenever they got done, he told her how thankful he was for her, and told her a bunch of stuff about his kids and how thankful he was. And he got up and he walked in the bathroom, and she helped him in there, and he started to sit down, and he looked at her and he said, you probably want to go in the other room. And she said, are you okay? And he said, I'm okay. He said, but you probably want to go in the other room because you don't want to see this. So she did. She thought he was using the bathroom, or, She walked out of the bathroom and didn't even make it to the kitchen, and she heard him hit the floor. And he was gone. That quick. That much at peace. I believe that he went with so much peace because he knew the Lord. And he knew the Lord his whole life. And he trusted the Lord. And he went to church, and he grew up in a little country church out there, Caldwell Baptist Church. He grew up in that church. My uncle grew up in that church, Uncle Paul. Uncle Paul was a great, great man. He grew up in that church. I want to read a line or two from a text message that I got about maybe 4 weeks ago. It's from my cousin. He said, just want to let you all know that Dad passed away peacefully this morning at 9:15. He left the world on his terms, very coherent last night. The doctor asked him if he wanted to continue the fight or if he's ready for comfort care. His response was, he was ready to go home. He was able to sign his own paperwork. He raised his right hand and said, thank you, Lord, I'm coming home. Six hours later, he was gone. A man who served the Lord his entire life. He worked for the Lord his entire life. He gave all the time, was a deacon in his church. And I could talk for hours and not tell you what all Uncle Paul did and what a great guy he was. But he grew up in Caldwell Church. Now stick with me, all right? I'm going somewhere, I really am. I promise you, I'm going somewhere. The other night, Shelley and I were driving down the road. We went to Johnson City and we got us a pizza and we left and we're going back. And I said, you want to go home or you want to go for a ride? And she said, let's go for a ride. Just go that way. And so we drove and we drove and we drove, and we're out in the country and we're driving along. And an hour later, we're still driving along, taking back roads, turning here and turning there. And she kept asking me, do you know where you're at? And I said, don't have a clue. Don't have a clue where I'm at. Don't have a clue where I'm going. But just by some miraculous happening, I wound out and pulled in right there by the Dairy Queen in McLeansboro. You know, all the way from Johnson City on little gravel roads and back roads. Maybe I knew where I was going. Maybe I know where I'm going here too, okay? So my uncle trusted the Lord. He was at peace when his time came and he knew it was time for him to go home. He was at peace because he knew the Lord. He had worked for the Lord. He had laid a foundation. He had done all of this work. He grew up in Caldwell Church. Not that Caldwell Church is anything better than any other church, but it has a point to this story here in a minute. Oh, by the way, this thing here, you'll find this kind of interesting. 6 months after my dad died, my cousin bought his house, and he was cleaning some stuff out that we had left in the house. And he found this in the drawer of the vanity right next to the toilet stool where he laid down on the floor and died. He walked in the bathroom with this in his hand, turned to this page right here. He died on Monday, February 22nd. And he walked in there, laid this in the drawer as he did every morning. The verse is Mark 1:11. And there came a voice from heaven saying, Thou art my son, in whom I'm well pleased. Reads that in my mind, thank you, Lord, lays down on the floor and dies. Goes to heaven. Did he hear it again? I'd like to think he did. I'd like to think he walked in heaven and God says, there's my son in whom I'm well pleased. I want, when it's my turn to go, I want to have the peace that these guys did. I want to know that I have done something here. So if you have your Bibles tonight, open them up to James. I told people in the sound booth that I was going to start in James. We're going to skip way down and go down probably to verse 19. I like the book of James. James is like the how-to book of Christian living to me. James starts off and he says, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to act. This is where you need to serve. This is what you need. I really like that. Now, there's some of it that I don't really care for. That part about count it all joy when you fall into various trials, I just kind of skim over that and go on, you know. But I try to pay attention to some of the things there in the book of James. Verse 19, James 1:19 says, So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. I like to think of that's a kind of a trait of the Wilburn men, the Wilburn family. We're all pretty quiet most of the time until we need to say something. We'll be driving down the road and Shelley will look at me and she'll say, are you okay? I'll say, I'm perfect. Fantastic. What's the matter? She'll say, well, you're not saying anything. You haven't said anything for 30 minutes. I ain't anything to say. I'm being a good boy. You know, I'll tell her that. I'm being a good boy. Take advantage of it. Well, you got it. Swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Verse 20. For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Verse 21. Therefore, lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness. This is very, very important for me to let you know this. You got any filthiness in your life? You got any wickedness in your life? I want you to lay it aside. I want you to throw it away. I want you to get rid of it. You know, Meredith said something about she liked my shirt. tonight when I walked in, and I told her, I said, yeah, I said, I make this shirt look good, don't I? You know, and she laughed, and I laughed. And I said, well, if it was wadded up, laying over there someplace, it wouldn't look too good. But you put it on, it looks a little better. The truth is, she doesn't know this, and I'll confess this to you, and my wife's probably ready to crawl underneath the chair right now. But the last time I wore this shirt, I don't remember where we went, but I only had it on for an hour or so. And I go home and I take it off and I lay it over a chair, okay? And it's been laying in the bedroom. It's laid over this chair. And tonight when I started to come here, I went in there and picked it up and put it on. Now, none of the rest of you ever do that, I'm sure. None of the rest of you have ever taken a shirt and thought, that's not too bad. That's okay. I could wear that again, right? None of the rest of you have ever done that, all right? I'm the only one. That's okay. But whenever it says, lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness, I read one guy said that that's kind of like when you come in and you've got the nastiest shirt on ever, and you don't just lay it over this chair, you like cast that thing away from you. You get it completely away. Today I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I went to work shortly thereafter, and we've been setting trusses today out in the sun, out in the heat. And when I got home, my socks are wet. From my shirt is wet, and everything between here and there is wet, and the water is running down in my boots. And I was sweating so much, and this is going to be kind of crazy for some of you people that exercise and health a lot. Pay attention to your health. I actually weighed yesterday morning. I don't know why. Wasn't going to do anything about it. The scale was there. I just thought, I'm going to step on this for a minute, you know. And I stepped on it and I saw what it was. I thought, look at that. And I left. Tonight, I got to thinking about it. I thought, I've sweat an awful lot today. I walked in. You're not supposed to weigh in the afternoon, right? After you've had lunch and after you've had all that stuff. I lost 4.5 pounds today. All right? It was in my boots. My feet are soaked. So that shirt, we ain't wearing that one tomorrow, okay? So you lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness, you cast it away. The best illustration I can give you for that is I've got a plumber buddy who carries little extra clothes in his truck, because he said once in a while he'll go out and he will get into such a horrible, horrible place that he has actually taken all of his clothes off and drove home in his underwear, and then gets out and puts it in the trash barrel, pours gas on it and lights his jeans and burns them up because they are that bad. You know, it wasn't long after we got married, Shelley establishing her role in the household, and she says, this is a hamper and this is where the clothes go, you know. And so I come in, I take my shirt off. Like tonight, I come in, I took my shirt off and it went right in the hamper. I knew exactly where it goes, okay? Because there's been other times that she said, you know, you walk in, you drop your shirt on the floor someplace, and she'd come through and say, is that yours? Then I look at her and say, I hope so. If it's not, I may have some questions of my own here, you know. Lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness. I don't want you to think that my dad and my uncle and my grandpa were these super spiritual saints, okay? They were not. They made mistakes. They maybe said things that, well, not Uncle Paul, he would never say a word out of line, but they probably said things that weren't exactly right sometimes. They probably did things. I'm sure they were all tempted with their own version of Bathsheba. I mean, I don't know how to say it. I'm sure there was a lot of things that they struggled with. But for the most part, they knew the Lord. They wanted to serve the Lord. They wanted to do what the Lord wanted them to do. So let me read that verse 21 again. Therefore lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness. Receive with meekness the implanted word which is able to save your souls. Verse 22, Dad's favorite verse of the Bible. Verse 22. But be ye doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Be ye doers of the word. If I had all these points, sometimes Pastor Jason has 3 points, 4 points, 5 points. I think I've only got one tonight. I want to encourage you to be a doer of the word. I want to encourage you to serve in a way that's going to leave a lasting legacy, that's going to make things go on for ages and ages, that God's work is going to be fulfilled in generation after generation after generation. You know why I'm so happy all the time? Why when you walk in here and you see me on Sunday and you say, "How you doing?" And I say, "I'm perfect. My feet's down, my head's up. I am happy. I am so blessed." Do you want to talk about crazy things? You want to sit down and get on the pity party? You know, people say, "Well, I know somebody who lost a house." Yeah, I've lost two. I've lost two. The first one, through some ignorance on my part. Just flat ignorance and inexperience. I had some guys I was going into business with one time, and their business was already established. And I was going to go into business with them, and we didn't do very well the first year. And at the end of the first year, they had signed the papers over to me, and the accountant had valued the business. It's just a hypothetical number, right? Because it doesn't mean anything until they value it at $100,000, and you sign that, yeah, I've received this thing, you know, this business worth $100,000 that really was just on paper, wasn't worth anything, had no assets at all. And so when I filed my income taxes that year, I owe twice more income taxes than what I actually made. And so I end up in Carbondale in the IRS office, and the guy very politely saying, "Listen, we're going to take your house, we're going to take your car, we're going to take your wife and kids, we're going to do this." And I'm scared to death, and I'm young and don't know any better, and I don't know that I can appeal this and that I can do all this. But so anyway, before long, the bank owns my house, and one of their buddies is living in it, you know, and me and Shelley is homeless, so to speak, you know. I mean, I didn't have any money. I didn't have any place to go. I had a friend who came to me, though, and he said, "I'm going to loan you enough money for a deposit on a house, you know, for rent." And so I went there, but I had this new house that we had worked on, and this new house that we had built together, and we lost it. And we ended up filing bankruptcy. And we lost everything that we had, and had 2 little girls at home, and she's pregnant, about to pop with our third, and we lose our house. So now, you know what I think? Can't take my birthday. I know who the Lord is. I know that I'm going to have something to eat. I know He's going to take care of me. I don't want to sit around, and I don't want your sympathy about stuff that I went through. I want you to hear this. If you are going through that, I am sorry that you are. Let's get you some help. Let's get you a way to get out of this, to get things straightened up. But I want to tell you this, there's no reason to whine about it. There's no reason to sit and spend the rest of your life saying, "I lost my house. I worked for 2 years on that house, every spare minute, and I walked off and left it. Somebody else is living there." I don't want you to do that. I don't do that. I say, you know what? I am happy with what the Lord has blessed me. God has given me so much. Pastor Michael called me here a while back and was talking about having a small group that he is going to host, and going to have it at our place in our pavilion or in my pole barn, and I love doing that. And people come out to our house and they eat, and they're like, "Wow, this is so amazing. that you open this up. But you know why I opened it up? It's not mine anyway. It belongs to God. God's letting me live there. And if he decides to take it tomorrow, it's okay. I trust him. I want you to trust him. I want you to have peace in your life. And here's how you have peace. You have peace by being a doer of the word. You do the word every day. Verse 23 says, for if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man observing his natural face in a mirror, for he observes himself and goes away and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. Now, I don't really know everything about what that says right there. It's a little confusing to me, but I'll tell you what I see. I see a guy who maybe has some hair, because it won't work with me, but I see a guy who walks up to the mirror in the morning, who sees his face in the mirror and says, boy, my hair looks horrible. I need to comb this thing today. I need to do something with this mop. That really looks bad. And turns around and walks off, and goes out the door and goes about his life. That is a man who observes his natural face in the mirror, observes himself, and goes away. He goes away without any correction. Some of you today, you hear Pastor Jason, you come in here on Sunday morning and you hear him preach and you think, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. I need to quit doing that. You observe your face in the spiritual mirror of God's word and you see that this is what I'm supposed to do, and yet you turn around and walk out the door and you don't do anything to correct it. You know what's sad about being a pastor? What is sad is pastors spend, I don't know, I'm going to make this number up, okay? I have no statistics to back this up, but I'll bet that our pastors spend 75% of their time dealing with people doing stupid stuff that they ought to know that they shouldn't be doing anyway. Yeah. I just imagine that, wouldn't it be nice if Pastor Michael could come and visit your uncle or visit your dad or visit your neighbor in the hospital, but he don't have time because he's visiting you because you're doing stupid stuff because you came to church last week. Jason preached and you thought, boy, I need to change that. And you get up and you observe your natural face in the mirror and you turn around and walk out and don't do nothing about it. That's it. That's it. I just don't understand why it's so complicated in the minds of many people. It's not hard. It's not hard. Verse 25 says, but he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work. This one will be blessed. That one will be blessed. And you know that part about the mirror, I got a note over here to the side that I thought was pretty good, so I got to jump back and hit that, okay? That part about a man observing his face in a mirror, what kind of mirrors do you think they had back then? Do you think that they went to Walmart and got a big mirror with a frame or went to some place and got a big mirror with a frame? They didn't have mirrors like that. What they had was they had metal. And maybe it was brass, and maybe it was hammered out, and maybe it was polished and polished and polished and polished, so it wasn't a mirror like what we think. So when he's saying observed his natural face in the mirror, you couldn't just see it from way over there. You had to get up there pretty close. And you had to really study to see yourself. You see where I'm going with this? You had to study to observe your natural face in the mirror. This is who I am. My natural face, this is the way my body is. This is what I do. But what I need to be looking at, I don't need to compare it to this. I need to compare it to this, to the cross. You know, I need to compare to that. He who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, not a forgetful hearer, but a forgetful doer, not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of this work. This one will be blessed. Have you been blessed? I want to tell you, my family has been blessed. Oh, sure, I've got some cousins who are just nuts, you know. I got some kids right now who are just being completely ridiculous. Some of the stuff, you know what? I can't do anything about that. They're grown people. I did the best I could when I raised them. I taught them. And if they want to believe and they want to follow, that's my heart's desire. I pray for them every day. But there comes a time where I'm not responsible, okay? There comes a time when I am responsible for me and for her. And as for our house, we're going to serve the Lord. As for our house, we're going to be perfect. We're going to have fun. We're going to enjoy life. We're going to go out and we're going to do the things that need to be done. You know, whether you get any recognition or not, whether you get noticed or not, how many times have you walked through here and see a gum wrapper on the floor and pick it up and think, boy, I don't need to be there. And you pick it up and you put it in your pocket. I've seen our pastors do that. It's not their job. Well, you know what? It's not my job either. But they can do it. I can do it. You can do it. I remember 12 or 13 years old, walking in the back of the church and walking by the back, all these pews here, and I'm between the wall and the back pew, and I walked past these two, how do I want to say this? Two well-fed, boisterous women sitting there talking on the back row. You probably can't say that on Sunday morning, Pastor Jason. But, okay? So they're sitting on the back row just as I walk past, and one of them nudges the other one and says, see that paper down there? She said, yeah, I see it. And the other one said, it's a gum wrapper. I rolled it up and I dropped it down there 3 weeks ago. I'm wanting to see if the janitor is really vacuuming the floor, how often he vacuums, because I don't think he's doing his job. The janitor used to work in the coal mine. He got ran over by a train. This arm is cut off right here. The train went across right there. He had those 2 fingers and a thumb. He cleaned that church every week. We lived next door. He fired the church with a coal-fired furnace, shoveled coal in with one arm. He could shovel coal and fill up the stoker. And I remember often, me being a little kid, I'd go over there, hey, Jay, I'll help you do that. And I'd shovel the coal and shovel the coal and shovel the coal, you know. And I can remember thinking, I can't believe this. These 2 women are sitting here throwing stuff on the floor just to see if the janitor, a one-arm, 2-finger, 1-thumb janitor, to see if he's vacuuming the floor. That's what our pastors deal with, okay? You know why? I can say this. I'll tell you why. Because some of you aren't doing the work. Some of you are not being doers of the word. You are sitting there just wanting to say, well, Lord, how are you going to bless me this week? How are you going to bless me? I don't know about all these notes. I don't know that all this is even really necessary. I'll just tell you notes about this, that, and the other. I don't know. Hey, Corley, we're getting close. We're not real close, Corley, but we're getting close, all right? I love to have fun. So, let me tell you a little bit more about Grandpa. I told you he wasn't the greatest He wasn't this Bible scholar. He was an ordinary man, but just wanted to work. Okay? 1924, Grandpa gets married. Him and Grandma get married. I'm not going to tell you that he was perfect, because somehow 7 months later their first baby's born. I remember he laughed one time and told me, he said, all these people think about you kids going out parking. There's just as many babies made in the back of a buggy as there was in the back of the cars. You know? And I thought, I don't know that I need to know that, Grandpa. You know? But in 24, Grandpa's married. Later on in 24, Uncle Leon's born. In 26, a baby's born. In 28, a baby's born. In 1930, Uncle Paul's born. In 32, another was born. 34, 36, Angie's dad was born. I think it was 36, wasn't it? 38, back here, Julie was back there a while ago. I don't see her now, but Julie was here. Her grandma was born in 1938, which is my dad's sister. And then in 1942, my dad was born. So every 2 years, they were having kids. So in 1932, the minutes of the Caldwell Baptist Church read that the church was growing. They needed more room. And Audie Wilburn stood up and said if the church would raise the money to buy the material, he would provide the labor and put a basement under the church for free. 1932. You know what happened in 1929? There was a depression. But what else happened was his 3-year-old little girl died, which would have been my aunt. In 1928, one of his boys died. So he lost a boy that was 1 year old, and the next year he lost a little girl that was 3 years old. And so in 1932, he stands up and says, I'll do this for the Lord. Keep in mind, Grandma's pregnant. She's got a baby on the way, which would be number 5, but 2 of them had just died. He would have had an excuse to be mad at God, wouldn't he? Apparently he didn't, because Uncle Paul grew up in that church, in that basement. My dad was a little kid, went to Bible school at that church. I went to Bible school at that church, in that basement. Some of my kids went to Bible school in that basement. That is being a doer of the word. That is making a sacrifice that will give you a lasting legacy. So let me tell you how he raised the church up. I asked him one time, I said, Grandpa, how'd you do that? He said, oh, it wasn't that bad. He said, the church is here about a third as big as this sanctuary. So maybe from here to there, and from this wall to that wall back there. That's how big the little country church was. And he said, I went about 15 feet on this side of the church, and he said, I started digging with a slip. You know what a slip is? No hydraulics, no motors. It looks like kind of like a wheelbarrow with no wheel. And it's open on the front. Got a set of handles on it. And you take a team of horses, and the team of horses walks this way, and you tilt that up, and you scrape up a bucket, a wheelbarrow load of dirt. And then you drive it around out there, and you flip that over, and you dump that dirt over. And you come back around, and you do it again. And you do it again, and again, and again, and again. and you dig a basement with a ramp going down, and you get your hoe and you get your grub hoe and you get your shovels and you clean out the corners and you dig a hole where the basement is going to go. And then you get a box, a steel box, and you drag it off in there. In 1932, you couldn't call Odom concrete. You got a box and put it down in there, and you got all of the loose supplies, and you mixed the concrete by hand. Then you pour the floor. He pours the floor, lay the concrete blocks up for the basement. The church is over there. He crawls underneath the church, and he does that 50 times. And he takes a house jack. Now, I called a couple of buddies and I asked them, I said, you guys got a house jack? And I want to tell you that a real house jack is about this big around and about that tall. And thank God we couldn't find one. But I had a friend who had that little bitty half-size version of one, okay? But the one Grandpa took underneath the house was huge. And so he would crawl underneath the house, and he said, I had 30 or 40 house jacks underneath that church. And you would go underneath there, and you'd put a steel rod in it, and you'd turn this thing. A turn, and then crawl to the next one, and turn it a turn, and crawl to the next one. Just imagine how long it would take to raise that church an inch 50 times over and over and over again. And so then he said, I raised it up about this high. I went down in the woods. I cut some long timbers. I slid those logs underneath that church with a team of horses. I let the church down on those logs. He said, I ran cables around there and set a post out in the yard over there. You still with me? Said, post in the yard. Put a big pole on it. Got a winch mounted to it and got cables that run around the church. And he said, I had a little mule. And he said, I start with this mule walking around in a circle. And he said he'd walk around, he'd step over this cable, and he'd walk a little bit, step over that cable, and he'd walk. And he said it took days for that mule pulling that church. And he said we slid that church over the top of this basement. We built cribs and we supported the logs and we got it all up there. And after we finally got this thing across the basement with cribs 8 foot high, he said then we had to jack it up, take the logs out, let the church back down. And I was young, and I said, Grandpa, why'd you do that? He said, because we need the basement. You know, we needed a basement. The Lord needed it for his house. The Lord needed it. You know what I did this week? I clicked like on Facebook. Somebody posted a scripture. I did. Another friend needed encouragement, and I sent him a text message. Not hardly the same as spending months and months jacking up a church, building a basement, doing all the work. And please don't hear me say that clicking like on Facebook or sending a text is not important. It is important. It's very important. But friends, you can do so much more. You can do more. You can pick up the trash. You can work and you can serve. You can go up and you can just show up here one day. You can just show up here with a bottle of Windex and a paper towels, and you can say, hey, I just come by for a couple hours. What can I do? You know, there are so many things that you could do in your life. You could serve and leave a lasting legacy. Shelley and I were talking on the way down here. I told her, I said, we'd drive down the road, and I said, play me a song. She said, which one? I said, that one that goes, bless the Lord, oh my soul, I'm living in the overflow. Play that one. And so she's pulling it up on Spotify or on a church app or something. I don't know how she does it. But anyway, it comes out the speakers of the car just a little bit. All right? And she's playing that. And I said, you know what? Every time Melissa sings that song, I sit here and I think about my grandpa and his coffee cup. My grandpa would take a saucer and a coffee cup, and when he would pour coffee, he would pour the cup completely full and just keep pouring it and let it overflow into the saucer. And then he would set that over to the side, and he would pick that saucer up and he would drink out of that saucer. And I told Shelley, I said, you know what? Every time she sings that on Sunday morning, I stand over there, tears run down my face, thinking about my grandpa, because I think about his cup running over.
That's right. Amen.
I think about swimming in that saucer as the Lord is filling his cup, and here I am, and I looked at her tonight and I said, you know what, it's just occurred to me, just in the last couple days, that my life, I am swimming in the overflow of his work. Of his work. Aaron Porter said the other day, was making a comment about his grandparents and about how, well, I knew this. Now I already forgot, Aaron. See? That happens. Talking about the blessings chasing you, or you chasing after the blessings, and the blessings chasing you and revival chasing you, and that's what it was. It was revival chasing you over something that they did years ago, over some work that they did, over something that they gave of themselves. So I want to ask you tonight, is Angie Bean's my cousin, by the way, if you haven't picked that out so far, but is Angie sitting here tonight in this house? Is she here because her daddy grew up in the basement of Caldwell Church and taught her about God? Is she here tonight because her dad grew up in a place that grandpa did this and moved the church over the top? Is she here because of that? Would she have been here without his sacrifice? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe she would have come to know the Lord anyway. Maybe Shelley would have come to know the Lord anyway, but let me tell you how she did come to know the Lord. Grandpa builds the basement. I hear about Jesus. I get saved and baptized when I'm 8 years old, and I start working and serving in the church. I find me the prettiest girlfriend any place. Start dating her. I bring her out to church first thing to teach her about Jesus. And she asked Jesus in her heart. And now she is serving today. And she's writing books that are in the bookstore out there. And some of you have read, and some of you have been encouraged by her on the stage. Is that all because Grandpa built the basement? I don't know. I'd like to think that it has a small part of it. Just like I'd like to think that if you get involved in something here, that 30, 40, 50, 80 years from now, I don't know, we're talking 90 years almost since he built the basement. And here I am still talking about it, about his sacrifice, about his work. And I just wonder, what about you? What are you doing? Are you serving? Is it going to leave a legacy? Are you helping out in the kids' church? Are you helping out with Bible school? Are you doing something great? Are you just going on and saying, you know what? I'm just tired. Grandpa lost 2 kids. Would that have been a reason to stop? Or was that something that spurred him on? Was that something that he thought, you know what? I've lost these 2. All the rest of them need to hear about Jesus. Was that the way it was? I don't know. I know if I could turn back the clock 31 years, I'd like to ask him some questions. But I'd also like to tell him thanks. Because Psalm 37 says, I have been young and now I'm old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging for bread. I got stuff today in my life. I got blessings in my life. I got blessings because of you folks in my life. I am blessed with you being in my life because I grew up in a place where I heard about the Lord and I wanted to be here. And I want to do a sacrifice that's going to leave a lasting legacy. I remember when Grandpa would get ready to go to bed at night, and I was just a little guy, and I would watch him open his Bible, stand there and read it. I don't want my grandkids now to say, you know what? I remember my grandpa, Papa used to watch YouTube videos and laugh and laugh and laugh in the evening time. I don't want that. I want to do something for the Lord. What about you? You doing enough? Can you do more? Are you being a doer of the word? Are you serving every day? That's the questions today. If you want to stand with me, if you need prayer, there's people here who pray with you. If you just want to come down and pray, just you and the Lord, that's just wonderful too. But I just want you to think about your legacy. I want you to take just a moment before you leave here tonight. Take just a moment. Observe your face in the mirror. See if there needs to be a correction. See if there needs to be an adjustment. Look in that perfect law of liberty that it talks about. Look in that. Compare yourself to that. See what you need to do and make those adjustments.
Thank you again for tuning into the Purpose House Church YouTube channel. When you're on site here, we do a 3-week challenge, asking you to come to any and all of our services for 3 weeks, and we believe that you would find your new church home. But now that you're online, I'm asking you to do the 3-click challenge. Click the subscribe button, click the like button, and click the share button. By liking and sharing our video, you're helping us fulfill our purpose of sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world. Then if you would, in the comments section, please let me know where you're watching from and if there is anything that we can pray with you about in your life. Thank you again for tuning in to the Purpose House Church YouTube channel, and I look forward to seeing you again real soon.